Welcome to the channel. Today I'm taking you into the heart of a war so strange, it almost sounds made up. Machine guns, military strategy, and birds. Let's dive in. Prologue. A war unlike any other imagined a battlefield. Not one of men against men, but of men against nature. Not rifles versus rifles, but rifles versus feathers. In the vast sun-scorched plains of Western Australia in the year 1932, a war broke out. But this was no ordinary war. There were no opposing generals, no treaties, no surrender. On one side stood the Australian government, armed, trained, and determined. On the other, emus. Yes, emus, giant, flightless birds native to the continent, up to 6 feet tall, built like velociraptors, and just as stubborn. And the strangest part? The birds won. Chapter 1. Australia. After the Great War, it was the early 1930s. The world was still reeling from the aftermath of World War I. Australia had sent over 400,000 troops to the trenches of Europe, nearly 10% of its entire population. Many of them didn't return. Those who did came back changed, scarred by the trauma of war, hungry for peace and purpose. The government, eager to provide for its veterans, offered them land in Western Australia. Soldier-settler schemes, they were called. The idea was simple: give returning soldiers farmland to restart their lives, to cultivate the nation, to build something new out of the ashes of war. But there was a problem. The land was unforgiving. The soil was dry, the climate harsh, and the infrastructure nearly non-existent. Crops failed, debts piled up, and just as the settlers began to find a rhythm, just as they began to harvest wheat and hope, another enemy emerged. Chapter 2. The invasion begins. They came with the changing seasons. Tens of thousands of emus, over 20,000 by some accounts, migrating from inland Australia toward the coast. Driven by instinct, hunger, and the promise of water, they swept across the land like feathered locusts. And when they reached the farmlands of the ex-soldiers, they didn't just pass through, they feasted. Fences were trampled, crops were decimated, water troughs were emptied, grain stores were picked clean. To the weary farmers, already fighting droughts and market crashes, this wasn't a nuisance, it was an invasion. And in 1932, the farmers did something unexpected. They called for military assistance. Chapter 3. Enter the Army. When the cries for help reached the Australian government, the response was mixed. Some laughed, others frowned, but a few took it seriously, perhaps too seriously. By late 1932, a plan had formed. The Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce, approved a military operation. The logic? If the farmers were ex-soldiers and their enemy was organized, fast, and destructive, then perhaps this was a job for the Army. And so, Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery was sent west. Alongside him, 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis machine guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Their mission? To assist the farmers in controlling the emu population, unofficially, to wage war on birds. Chapter 4. The Battle of Campion begins November 2nd, 1932. The first engagement. The soldiers spotted a group of about 50 emus near the town of Campion. They set up, waited, aimed. But as they fired, the emus scattered like ghosts in a dust storm. They were fast, astonishingly fast. Running up to 50 kilometers per hour, zigzagging unpredictably, they vanished into the brush before the gunners could reload. A few birds fell, most didn't. The soldiers learned an early lesson. Emus didn't behave like enemies. They behaved like guerrilla fighters. Major Meredith remarked, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world." Chapter 5. Tactical Failures and Feathered Fugitives. In the days that followed, the military tried new tactics. They ambushed groups of 1,000 emus, set up machine guns on trucks, chased them through fields. But it didn't work. The terrain was rough. The birds were agile. The trucks jammed. The guns overheated. The emus ran, and they didn't stop. One report stated that 2,500 rounds had been fired in a single day, with barely 100 birds down. The birds, it seemed, were adapting. Worse still, they had leadership. Farmers swore some flocks were led by dominant birds, scouts, commanders, who kept watch, warned others, and moved strategically. They nicknamed one of them the Black Leader, a massive emu who led his troop with military precision and always vanished before the gunfire began. Chapter 6. The Government Retreats. By December 1932, the operation had turned into a public embarrassment. Newspapers around the world ran mocking headlines. Emus outwit Aussie Army. Feathered foes defeat machine guns. Birds 1, humans 0. Criticism mounted. Parliament questioned the cost. Environmentalists protested. And the emus kept multiplying. After less than 2 months, the military campaign was called off. The final tally? Over 10,000 bullets fired. Less than 1,000 confirmed kills. That's right. It took roughly 10 bullets per bird. By military standards, it was a catastrophic failure. Chapter 7. The Aftermath and the Emu Legacy. The farmers were left to defend their land alone. Eventually, the government provided bounties instead, paying for each emu killed by civilian hunters. That worked. A bit. But the damage had been done. The Emu War became legend. A tale so absurd it felt like satire. Yet it was real, documented, reported, and undeniable. For years, veterans whispered about it. Soldiers blushed, and Australians laughed. Because really, what else could you do? You couldn't unfire the bullets. You couldn't unlose the war. All you could do was remember it. Chapter 8. Lessons from the Feathered Front Lines. So what does the Great Emu War teach us? That nature is unpredictable? That underestimating your opponent is dangerous? That even the mightiest weapons can fail? Yes, all of that. But maybe it also teaches us humility. We like to think we've conquered the natural world, that with machines we're invincible. But sometimes it takes a bird, 6 feet tall and too fast to shoot, to remind us otherwise. The emus didn't just outrun bullets, they outran arrogance. Chapter 9. A war that wasn't really a war. Let's be clear, no official declaration was ever made. No flags were raised, no peace treaty signed, and yet history remembers it as the Great Emu War. Why? Because it had all the elements. A military campaign, a defined enemy, casualties, and a clear outcome. But more than that, it had irony, it had absurdity, and above all, it had truth. Not the kind you find in textbooks, but the kind that lingers in folklore. The kind that says, sometimes we lose to things we don't understand, and sometimes they have feathers. Chapter 10. The Emu's Revenge, or Just Survival. Were the emus vengeful? Of course not. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to survive. But in doing so, they became symbols of resistance, of wildness, of the untamed force that still lives beneath the surface of civilization. In 2020, Australia commemorated the Emu War with tongue-in-cheek memes and reenactments. There's even talk of a movie because the story is too perfect to forget, and maybe it shouldn't be forgotten. Epilogue. When the dust settled today, the emus still roam Australia, majestic, unapologetic, unconquered, and somewhere in the red dirt plains, perhaps the descendants of the Black Leader still look out over the horizon, watching, waiting, not for another war, but just being emus, free, wild, and still undefeated. And that was the Great Emu War, a tale so absurd, yet so real, it leaves you wondering what history hasn't told us. If you enjoyed this wild journey through feathers and firepower, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more unbelievable stories, and hit the bell so you never miss an adventure. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. See you in the next one.